What's going on? It's Taisophon. I hope you're having a good day today, and I'm coming at you guys with another video. Fang is one of those characters where the second she shows up in Final Fantasy XIII, you could pretty much tell what kind of character she's gonna be. She carries herself very confidently, she kinda has this aggressive personality that I really like, and I think she has one of the best accents in the entire series. Her accent, in my opinion, is definitely up there with Balthier and France. She carries a massive spear and she walks around like she already knows she's the toughest person in the room. And honestly, that makes me love her even more. There are things about Fang that I absolutely love, from her personality, how she carries herself, her character design, to her relationship with Vanille, her bond with Lightning, and her determination to protect the people she cares about. But even with that being said, there are also moments where I felt like Fang was being kept at arm's length from the rest of the cast. She has some really strong relationships with certain characters, but when it comes to people like Hope, Saz, and Snow, I sometimes felt like Fang was more of an outsider who happened to be traveling with the group rather than someone who genuinely became part of the group, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's grade that character, Fang from Final Fantasy XIII. Pro number 1, her personality. I think we should start with probably the easiest thing to praise Fang about, which is her personality. Fang has an attitude, and I mean that in the best possible way. She's very confident, sarcastic, stubborn at times, a little intimidating, and she's not afraid to challenge people when she thinks they're making bad decisions. And I think this was extremely important for Final Fantasy XIII's cast because Fang provides a completely different energy from a lot of the other characters. Lightning was always reserved and emotionally distant from the other characters, especially during the beginning parts of the game. Hope was anxious and inexperienced compared to the rest of the cast. Snow is extremely energetic and idealistic, which is to be expected from someone trying to play hero all the time. Saz was more grounded and mature than everyone else. Vanille was cheerful and optimistic even when she was hiding a lot of pain. And then there's Fang. Fang walks into the group like, yeah, I'm here, what's the problem? And I hate how much I love that about her. She's not focused on trying to make everyone like her. She's not trying to prove that she's the strongest person in the group. She's just extremely confident in who she is. And even when Fang is being stubborn, I think there's usually a reason for it. Fang is someone who's already been through an enormous amount of trauma. She and Vanille were connected to the entire conflict of the game for centuries and lost a lot of their memories in the process. They've been manipulated by circumstances they didn't understand, like finding out what their focus is supposed to be. And they've essentially been thrown into a world that expects them to fulfill a role they didn't wish for, and that the fal'Cie anima casted on them. So when Fang acts aggressive or defensive, it doesn't necessarily come across as random hostility. It feels like someone who's learned that if she doesn't take control of the situation, things could go very badly for her, Vanille, and the rest of the gang. And that brings me to one of my favorite things about her. Pro number 2, her determination to protect Vanille. If you want to understand Fang as a character, you have to understand her relationship with Vanille, because as much as Fang acts tough, Vanille is clearly the person who brings out the softer side in her. Fang's determination to protect Vanille is probably her defining trait. She is willing to fight against basically everything standing in her way if it means giving Vanille another chance to live. And I think that's what makes Fang so likable, because underneath all that sarcastic humor, confidence, and aggression, Fang is actually a really compassionate character. She cares about Vanille deeply, she just doesn't always express that care in a traditional way. And that's really important because Vanille is carrying a lot of guilt for not being able to destroy Cocoon centuries before the events of the main game. This is something that Fang clocks onto the longer she travels with Vanille. She knows all the crap they've been through together, so while other characters might see Vanille as someone who needs to accept responsibility for her actions, Fang sees Vanille as someone she refuses to abandon. And I think that says a lot about Fang as a character. She's not trying to save Vanille because she thinks Vanille is some perfect girl or whatever. She's trying to save her because she loves her like she's family. There's a huge difference between those things. And honestly, some of Fang's best moments are when you see that tough exterior start to crack whenever Vanille is in danger. And then that's when you start to realize Fang isn't just a tough chick from Grand Pulse. This is also someone who's terrified of losing the person she cares about the most. Pro number 3, her relationship with lightning. I also really like Fang's relationship with lightning, and it's interesting because they're actually pretty similar to one another. Both women are strong-willed women with a lot of determination and stubbornness. Both of them have trouble expressing their emotions, and both have a tendency to take responsibility for everything themselves. But the way they handle those qualities throughout the game is completely different. Lightning tends to shut people out, whereas Fang tends to challenge people. Lightning's response is often, "I'll handle this myself," whereas Fang's response is more like, "Alright, fine, let's get this done." And I think that's why they work so well together. Fang is one of the few people in the game who doesn't seem intimidated by Lightning. If Lightning is talking a bunch of BS, Fang calls her out on her BS. She's not afraid to disagree with her and challenge her thoughts. And she isn't afraid to push Lightning when she thinks she's making the wrong decision. But at the same time, I think Fang respects Lightning's internal strength. There's a mutual understanding between both of them. They don't need to constantly explain themselves to each other all the time. They just kinda get each other naturally. And considering how emotionally guarded both characters are, that makes their relationship surprisingly effective in my opinion. Pro number 4, her character design. Now let's talk about something that might sound superficial, but I'm giving Fang a point for it anyway. Her character design is fire, and I don't care what nobody has to say about it. She was the character that immediately stood out to me compared to everyone else in the team as far as looks go. And the reason for that is because she doesn't look like most other Final Fantasy party members in the series. I feel like she has her own unique look that sets her apart from everyone else. I like her long wavy hair, her tribal inspired clothing, her bead necklace, tattoos, and her cool looking spear, which, like I said before, give her a really distinct look in my opinion. She almost looks like a female version of Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid, but that could just be a reach on my part. I think her weapon of choice is perfect for her, because imagine Fang using tiny daggers or something, it wouldn't feel right. A character like Fang needs something that looks like it could be used to completely ruin someone's day. I think her spear fits her fighting style, her personality, and her physical presence. And I really like the way Final Fantasy XIII uses her weapon as part of her identity. It's almost like she's not just carrying a weapon because the game needed to give her one. It's like the spear feels like an extension of Fang herself. It complements her personality traits, which is aggressive, powerful, and commanding. Pro number 5, her battle style. Speaking of combat, Fang is one of my favorite characters to actually play as in Final Fantasy XIII. She's incredibly satisfying to use. As a sentinel, she's one of the best characters for taking punishment and protecting the party. As a commando, she hits hard and does extremely high amounts of damage compared to the other party members. The last time I checked, she is the hardest hitting character in the game as far as physical non-elemental damage goes. As a saboteur, she can weaken enemies by lowering their defenses, which gives her access to deal even more damage than before. And when you combine these different roles together, Fang becomes incredibly versatile as a character, but what I really like is that her gameplay matches her personality. Fang isn't like a mage just standing in the back of the battlefield. No, she's right in the middle of the chaos. She's jumping around, swinging that spear, launching enemies into the air, weakening the enemy and causing a whole bunch of problems for them. A really oppressive playstyle now that I think about it. And then when you add her Eidolon, Bahamut, which is basically the game saying, yeah, you thought Fang wasn't intimidating enough? Let's give her one of the most powerful summons in the franchise. And I'm completely okay with that. With all that being said, her combat identity is one of the strongest parts of her character. Pro number 6, her determination. Another thing I really admire about Fang is how determined she is throughout the story. Once Fang decides something needs to be done, good luck convincing her otherwise. And that can sometimes become a negative, which we'll get into later. But as a positive, I think it's one of her greatest strengths. I never took Fang as the type of character to give up easily. She definitely showed strength of character dealing with what she was dealing with in the game. Even when the situation seems impossible to overcome, like I said before, she shows strength of character during those tough moments. And that's important considering the circumstances surrounding her and Vanille. These characters are constantly being told that their fate has already been decided. They're being told what they're supposed to become, and they're being told what they have to do as far as their focus is. And Fang's response is basically, no, That stubborn refusal to accept predetermined fate is one of the things I really like about Final Fantasy XIII as a whole, and Fang is a character that embodies that idea to a T. She refuses to let other people decide what happens to Vanille, and she also refuses to accept that their lives are predetermined by their focus, and she refuses to stop fighting. Personally, I think that's a very strong character trait to have in your arsenal. Con number 1, she feels like an outsider. Now let's get into the problems I have with this character, and this is probably my biggest criticism of Fang. Sometimes she doesn't feel like part of the group, and I don't necessarily mean that Fang doesn't care about the other characters. I think she does care about the other members, but the game doesn't always do enough to show it. I mean, think about the relationships between the other members of the party. Lightning and Hope develop a strong bond with one another through their shared loss of a loved one and trying to survive being hunted down as l'Cie. Snow and Lightning obviously have a history together by both being connected to Sarah, who is Lightning's younger sister. Saz has a relationship with Vanille because her actions in the past caused Saz's son to become branded as l'Cie, which he later on forgave her for it and healed in the process. Vanille and Hope develop an emotional connection with one another by comforting each other through grief and guilt, and Fang has a relationship with Vanille. Both are childhood friends, and they both go through the game overcoming feelings of guilt for why Pulse and Cocoon is in the state that it's in. But then you look at Fang and someone like Hope. I think there's potential there. Fang is a warrior who's been through an extreme amount of trauma. Hope is this young kid who's basically being thrown into what I would call a nightmare. I think Square could have done something with this dynamic. Fang could have become a mentor figure for Hope. She could have helped him become more confident in who he is and could have taken some of Fang's assertiveness, which is something he still gained by the end of the story. Hope could have challenged Fang's worldview and how she goes about things in the way that she does, but we don't get as much as that as I would have liked. And the same thing goes for Saz. Saz is one of the most, if not the most, grounded character in the party, and as we know, Fang is much more aggressive and impulsive. That could have created some really entertaining back and forth conversations between the two, but instead their relationship feels relatively limited, and that's a missed opportunity because Fang has the personality to bounce off of basically everyone in the game. Con number 2, her attitude can be frustrating. Now, I like Fang's attitude, but every once in a while she gets on my nerves, and the Eidolon awakening sequence is probably the best example of this. This is one of those moments where I understand what the story is trying to communicate. She's frustrated, she's really desperate, she's trying to protect Vanille, and she started to feel like all her efforts up to that point in the game were for nothing. But the way Fang handles it makes her come across as unnecessarily hostile, and that's where I think her stubbornness can become a problem. There's a difference between being determined and refusing to listen to other people's input. Fang occasionally crosses that line every now and then, and I think the important thing is that she eventually realizes she can't solve everything herself. She accepts the help of the other characters, and I actually appreciate that, because if Fang just stayed stubborn from beginning to end, I think that would make her a much weaker character, and I would unfortunately have to rank her a lower grade on the tier list. The fact that she eventually allows herself to rely on other people is important, because Fang spends so much of the story believing that she needs to protect Vanille herself, but eventually she learns that she doesn't have to carry that burden on her own. Con number 3, her relationships could have been developed more. This ties into my earlier point, but I think it deserves its own section. Fang has some pretty decent relationships, but I wish the game had given her more relationships and more screen time with the other characters, because Fang has so much potential due to her personality. Imagine Fang and Snow having more scenes together. They're both extremely confident physical fighters, but at the same time their personalities are completely different. Snow is more on the optimistic and emotional side, where Fang is more on the cynical, pragmatic side. That could have been hilarious, seeing how two people with such a different nature from one another would have played out. Or Fang and Saz. Saz, being the based, level-headed guy he is, could constantly be questioning Fang's reckless decisions while Fang just tells him to stop worrying. And then there's Hope as well. This is probably the one I wanted the most, because Fang could have been someone who teaches Hope how to stand up for himself. And Hope could have reminded Fang that protecting someone doesn't mean being the boss and controlling every decision they make. That could have been a really cool dynamic. Instead, Fang's strongest emotional connection remains with Vanille, which is great, but it makes Fang feel slightly isolated from the rest of the cast. And that's why I feel like she's in the party without completely being part of the party. Con number 4. Her story is very tied to Vanille. Now, this isn't necessarily a huge problem, but I do think Fang's character is heavily dependent on her relationship with Vanille. If you remove Vanille from Fang's story, you lose a massive portion of Fang's motivation. Characters can absolutely be defined by their relationship with other characters, whether that being the main cast or the supporting cast. But I would have liked to see Fang have more personal motivations outside of protecting Vanille. Who is Fang when she's not protecting someone? What does she want herself? What kind of life does she want if all this conflict disappeared? We don't get to explore those questions as much as I would have liked to, and that's one reason why I think Fang is an A-tier character instead of an S-tier character. She's incredibly likable, she's memorable, she's well designed, she has a dope personality, but I think there was still room to make her feel more complete as an individual. Alright, so where does Fang land? For me personally, Fang is an A-tier character, and honestly she's a pretty strong A-tier character. Her personality is great, her character design is great, her weapon and combat style fit her perfectly, her relationship with Vanille is one of the strongest relationships in Final Fantasy XIII. Her relationship with Lightning is also really interesting as well, and her determination to protect people she loves makes her incredibly easy to root for, but I can't quite put her into S tier. The biggest reason is that I wish Final Fantasy XIII had done more with her relationships outside of Vanille. I wanted more Fang and Hope, more Fang and Saz, more Fang and Snow. I wanted to see her actually become part of this strange little group of people who are all at the mercy of their circumstance. Because Fang is at her best when she's interacting with other characters, in my opinion. She's funny, she's blunt, she's assertive. Yeah, she can occasionally be annoying here and there, but she's also a caring person deep down inside, and I think that combination is what makes her work. Fang is basically the person who walks into the room acting like she doesn't need anybody, while secretly being one of the most emotionally invested people in the entire cast. And I think that's what makes her such a great character. She'll tell you she can handle everything herself. She'll probably yell at you if you disagree. She'll definitely threaten somebody with a spear, but when the people she loves are in danger, she's going to be there every single time. And that's why, for me, Fang gets an A. Not because she's perfect, but because the strengths of her character far outweigh the weaknesses. And I truly believe if Final Fantasy XIII had given Fang a little more time to develop relationships with the rest of the party, I might be sitting here giving her an S. But for now, Fang is an A-tier character, and that's a grade I think she absolutely deserves. As usual, if you like this episode of Grade That Character, hit the like button. If you want to keep up with more of my videos, hit the subscribe button. This has been Taisophon, and I'm out, people. Later.